Hey there, I'm Dr. Bruce Rippey. Today I'm get to be joined by my pastor, Mark Sheets. You know that I've been recording some of these great conversations with a lot of the Black leaders in our community, everybody from the people that I don't necessarily agree with to the people I agree with 100%. And it's been fantastic, honestly. And then I thought, you know what, one of the biggest people in my lives, of course, is the pastor of my church, Mark. He's a friend as well. And I thought, hey, I don't know. Let's bring Good Shepherd United Methodist and maybe a little bit of your conversation to the table, if that's okay. I'd like to know. I'd like to know what you think about all of this this unrest that's going on. It seems like we have two really big conversations happening right now. We have the social unrest, and then we have this pandemic, and it kind of depends upon which, I don't know, 24-hour news media you look at as to what's going on the most that day. So let's speak to the first thing on COVID. Let's go for that. You've had to do everything online. So tell me a little bit about the changes that, if someone would have told me in February, the government's not going to allow me to go to my church and listen to us sing and to listen to us work, I would have told you there's no way, that can't possibly happen. It did. What did you do to recover? You've done a great job, but I just want to let them know.
Yeah. First of all, as a fellow Kansas Citian, Bruce, can we just step back and say, if COVID would have hit 2 months early, we might not have had a Super Bowl ring. So
right.
let's just start out with where we're grateful, and that's that the Super Bowl got in on February the 2nd, and the Chiefs won the Super Bowl. And I'm saying that, full disclosure, I'm saying that as a Niners fan.
Yeah.
I don't know if you can see the logo back here. But I am happy for my Kansas City friends. It was really fascinating because this is mid-March that this takes place. Church leaders, like many other organizations, try to be nimble, try to figure out how to pivot. One of the things that we were trying to figure out, is this a snowstorm that's like a couple of days or a week? Is this a season like winter, or is this an ice age that's going to kind of be multiple years of brand new things? And we were just kind of skating along in the middle of March. And then on a Friday, I think it was Friday the 13th, if I'm correct, we got a huge just avalanche of Major League Baseball, the NBA, NCAA, NHL. All these leagues are shutting down. And once Major League Sports, which stands to make a lot of revenue from being open, shuts down, everybody starts to think differently. And so, gosh, we're going on 2 to 3 months now of that being the case. We happened, if you compare our church to others, we happen to be positioned, I guess, okay, in that we were already doing live stream worship. Yep. And there's some churches that didn't have that, and they kind of scrambled to figure out, how can we get Facebook Live or whatever method, how can we get this out to folks? So we feel that we were pretty fortunate in that regard. But you and I would both agree, there is just no replacement for person-to-person connection. Not everybody's blessed like you and I to live in a house with family members with us. There are people who live alone, they're single, divorced, or older. And when we're kind of mandated that we need to socially distance and stay away, and even when we had shelter in place, it can get pretty lonely, and the mental health aspect of our lifestyle can get pretty important pretty quickly.
I'm going to jump in because you're a friend, and this is going to happen often, folks. We're going to talk right over each other. It's just going to happen, and this is just a conversation. But I got to tell you, really impressed with what you've done. Music has always been a huge part of your life and mine, and what you've done with that. And then I really appreciate the fact that you put these series together that we can worship with Good Shepherd online. And it's actually a very valuable message each time. And it's kind of you in your home. It really felt like you were just one of us. Did you just set your camera up to do how did you actually do your sermons? Did you just set your camera up and go, okay, so this is, I know you plan them out. I know there's a lot of thought that goes into them, but do you just set up the camera and then just start riffing on what each of your ideas are? How does that work for you to build a sermon?
Well, it's the really interesting thing, just from a production standpoint. We had our media person come over, and they figured out where the lighting and all the camera stuff went, and actually taped onto our carpet where everything needed to go. And that was before all the shutdown came. And then whenever we would record, it had to be in the afternoon because of lighting. And we would have to put a note on her front door. Please don't ring the doorbell. Our kids will be out in 45 minutes. Because if the doorbell rang, the dog would bark and we'd lose the entire thing. And it happened a couple of times. So like anything else, you just have to figure out how to be nimble and kind of go with it. And some weeks it was okay and passable, and other weeks it was pretty bad.
Well, it looks fine from our standpoint, but and I also got to tell you now, one of the things that you're doing is you're building a studio inside Good Shepherd, and you're doing that on purpose for Gabo and for the worship leaders to be able to come together if that's going to work eventually. Now, he builds, I've seen it happen, he builds actually the voices into tracks and then blends all of that video and all of that audio together. And I've had the chance to work with him recently, and that's impressive. He makes the old MTV videos weren't that good. You know, the new ones are, but the old ones weren't that good. I mean, in all honesty, it's kind of impressive to put that. What a joyful noise. I mean, I got to tell, but I will say I missed coffee. I miss coming in and talking to you. I miss a hug. I miss being able to sit down and hear other people's voices, however good or bad they are, when we're all singing at the top of our lungs. I mean, I miss that. And at this point in time, what do you think about as far as opening again? It's going to be a while, or it very likely needs to be, huh? Because it's going to be either all masks and everybody masks all the time, which is difficult. And I know you've got good advice from the medical side, so it'll be a bit before we can actually open up, don't you think?
Yeah, it's I have a couple of friends in Joplin who opened up a couple weeks ago, and then this past Sunday they closed back down because I guess they had a hot spot happen.
Oh, yeah.
The thing that's working around in my head, at one point Major League Baseball last week wasn't even going to have a season. There's 35 some odd K-State football players now that are positive, whether that means they're asymptomatic or not.
Right.
And so it seems like college football is kind of teetering on the edge of whether they're going to have the season or not. And so it's really interesting because church is a place that tries to provide hope, and yet it's not like the grocery store where if you don't get it, you're going to physically perish,
Right.
versus the virtual side. And so if we were to open today, we would be in masks. We'd be 6 feet apart. The jury is still kind of out on whether we'd be allowed to sing or whether we'd have to sing into a mask. My friend's church on the plaza is open, and they come for 25 minutes and they read out loud the lyrics of the song that they don't sing. And then they have like a 12-minute sermon, and then they're given an opportunity to put an offering in a receptacle on their way out. And if they want communion, they're given communion in like a prepackaged deal that, between you and I, doesn't taste great. And it's kind of on their way out. And some of those folks are spending twice as much time in the car getting to church as they actually are in the service. So can we get back together? If we do, is it even compelling for folks versus the version we're offering them right now, where it's a full length deal? They can have communion at home. They can be in their pajamas. It's really tough to say.
Yeah, I still see the future as a church being together, and I see that happening eventually. But yeah, you're right. Right now, I don't know about it either. You know, even in my own world over at Bridge, you know, we are never at 50% capacity ever. That's just not possible because you don't have enough parking spaces for that. So everybody can easily stay 6 feet apart. And in all honesty, it's kind of an either or at this point. If you can stay 6 feet apart, you're good. If you can't, you need to be wearing a mask. I touch people for a living, so I always let them know this is what I'm doing. Are you okay with that? We also make sure that we stay tested for antibodies. We also go through all of the precautions that you would guess. Invariably, it happens every day. You know, the nurse practitioner comes up with the old gun and sits it against your forehead and goes, beep, 97.8, you're fine, you know, and then asks you the questions that we have to ask. But we do that now for all of our patients as well. I mean, all of that, but we're trying to get people healthy. And I get an idea that you want to avoid this disease. You know, in my world, man, you want to prevent it. And what you do to sleep, think, eat, and move in a healthy way prevents it. And I think that think well goes straight to God. Meditation, prayer, happy thoughts on purpose. Don't watch the news. I mean, I hate to say that, but
Yeah.
I think it's a bad idea. And then what you eat, I just did a thing, you probably saw my Facebook live post, but it was on vitamin D and the fact that, they had 98.9% of the people above 70 years old that had deficiencies in vitamin D died. The ones that were sufficient, it was 4%.
Wow.
So stopping people from going outside was the worst thing we could have done. I mean, truly, that's where you get a lot of your vitamin D. And I just but all of my stuff is on research and it's based on science and all of that. And that's my goal instead of this fear mongering. And so, what do you think? I don't want to get you caught up too bad, but let's talk a little bit about that. It seems like there's a lot of people selling fear right now. What's Mark's stance and what's our church's stance on this fear for sale?
Yeah, specifically, our church, Good Shepherd, is part of a denomination called the United Methodist Church, which has had a couple of 100-year history of seemingly focusing more on the side of grace than on the side of sin. Not that those are mutually exclusive or that they don't have a place within our faith. We take the stance, very few people are guilted into following Christ. So most people don't need convincing of how sinful they are. They actually need convincing that God would forgive them from the things that they've done wrong. And so we try to use hope more than fear because we feel like hope is a more powerful motivator and empowering thought process. And I just have to say, one of my favorite things of this whole pandemic has been the concept of inside and outside, which I never had really thought through at kind of a deep level. But, normal Mark gets up, goes to work, comes home after a long day of thinking and sits on the couch and just decompresses. But what happened was Mark couldn't go to the office for about a month. And I had never operated outside of my office. And what I noticed was I couldn't do it in the house. And I started getting outside more. I started working on the porch. I started going for walks. It wasn't too long before I thought, I don't have a bike that works, and I could not buy a bike. And Dr. Bruce, I mean, that's one of the greatest things to come out of this, that there's this reclaiming of physical interaction and health, because people are wanting to get outside because they just can't do the inside thing for that long. I like to run, that, but it comes in pockets. And I had been in a pretty inactive state, kind of from Thanksgiving through Christmas, New Year's, and all that kind of thing. And that really got me back outside and running. And you would know the science behind this, but if I run outside for 5 miles versus running on the treadmill, physically I feel better for both of those, but mentally I feel so much better if I do the run outside, even in the rain or the elements. There's just something from getting outside that does something for me. And I think you're dead on about the news. I'm not going to dog the news. We have people in the news that go to our church, and that's local and national. But you really have to have your head around the idea and concept of news, or else you could get kind of rabbit holed into some pretty negative thinking. And so if you're really trying to make the most out of life, pursuing hope and trying to figure out some sort of physical out or outside kind of vitamin D kind of thing, really kind of keep your mentality going forward, I think is really important.
I agree. I like the shift, and I really do. And I appreciate that. I much more like the grace. I like people looking, okay, what can I do to be better today? Not, oh my goodness, the environment's horrible. That's not useful to us, in my opinion. It winds up leading to circular thoughts. The people that go to work and then they sit down. Going to work used to mean going to work. You actually force through a distance, right? The physics of work, but it doesn't anymore. It means you're going to sit there at a computer and you're going to type away and you're going to go home then and watch whatever the binge is on Netflix. And unfortunately, my job got harder, but it also got harder just because of the mental aspect of lack of socialization. Immediately, as soon as they said social distancing, I said physical distancing. It's not social distancing at all. That's ridiculous. That's a horrible idea. I mean, in all honesty, I think we're pack animals. We're people that want to be together. I want to come to your church. I want to hear you speak. I want to hear those words spoken into me. I like having that kind of, and then I like the people around and having conversation. And honestly, if I think I would be self-destructive. So immediately, as soon as everyone said, well, you want to shelter in place, you want to shelter in place, the good news was I could go for a walk around my neighborhood. There was nobody there. Then in about 3 weeks, I would say everybody was there.
Yep.
Have you noticed a huge uptick in your neighborhood too?
Yep. And it does me a lot of good if I'm on a walk or a run to see other people out, whether they're using sidewalk chalk, fixing their car, just to be out. Man, I had not put together social distancing and physical distancing. That's a really creative way to talk about it. And think about this, layer on top of this, if you're familiar with Dr. Gary Chapman's book, The 5 Love Languages, there's a whole host of humanity whose main love language is physical touch.
Yep.
And you and I both know a guy in our church we love named Ron Bagley. He's a hugger. There are people like that. And how in the world would a chiropractor help somebody who's got carpal tunnel if you can't touch? Or what does it look like for people in nursing homes to have their family come and they have to be on the outside of the window? Touch goes a long way too. Imagine teaching kids in 1st or 2nd grade when school gets back at whatever level it's going to get back. And if you can't put a hand on a kid's shoulder and say, great job with your artwork or whatever. So that's physical distancing that's really good.
Yeah, I think that's the case. We've got to be socially close if we can, and maybe this will help. A lot of the social interactions today have actually been from a distance, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
It's the Snapchats and the the TikToks and the whatever, the Facebooks and so forth. And in fact, that's where this is going to go. And I look forward to putting that on there and inviting conversation. I'd love to hear what other people are dealing with, even the difficulties that they're dealing with. And I may not agree with you in a lot of things, but I never try to make you wrong, and you're the same way.
Right.
Because you disagree with me doesn't mean you're wrong. In fact, it's very possible I could be wrong. I just happen to hold this belief because of the experiences that I've had, So,
right.
and I really appreciate that. But I look forward to the comments. I look forward to some of the struggles that people are having too. I'd like to hear them. And if it's okay, I'm going to ask them to put those below. Let's talk about those. What do you miss the most about the last 3 months? What do you miss the most? Because that's going to speak to where society really wants to go. And then the other side of that we're dealing with, of course, the second big news item, and I do believe it's fear mongering, and I love those people that work for the news stations and all of that, but I don't like the message. So I'm just going to say that, even though it's a slightly different from the way you put it, because you do have people we know and love that go to our church that work in those industries. I'm just not a fan of the message right now. It seems to be all over the place. Having said that, what do you think about this Black Lives Matter, and then that the social unrest that we seem to also be having at this point in time? Where's God in this? Where's Christ in that?
Ooh. Yeah, and it feels heavy. No matter where you come to this conversation, it just feels like a really heavy thing. I'll just throw a quick caveat in about the media. I find locally that the media is more positive and potentially more fair than maybe some of the syndicate or national outlets have been. But
that's fair.
Yeah. But I would say this. So I am not. There's a term for somebody who is very moved and finds a lot of fulfillment and identity out of social justice. Sometimes people are called social justice warriors,
sure,
and might even be pejorative. That's probably not my disposition. I'm typically not a rock the boat kind of guy. I try to kind of swim in the middle if I can. I decided, since I had never been to a protest before, that I was going to go.
Yes.
There was one. We have a lot of folks that go to our church who are police officers. Some of my best friends are police officers. And I also have a lot of friends who are people of color. My wife is not a white person. And so I thought, this is a really fascinating concept. It seemed like that there was this Wednesday protest maybe a month ago where the mayor's office, like a local network of justice and equality kind of folks and the KCPD were working together, and they were going to do a kind of a march in unison.
Mm-hmm.
And so I thought, this is what the body of Christ looks like. Republican and Democrats holding hands, walking to the voting booth together, and then casting their ballot kind of deal, right? And so it was, tense. It was within a week or maybe 10 days at most of the events in Minnesota with George Floyd. I had not been out in public really that much yet. It was very hot. I felt like I should wear a mask. I'm not a mask kind of guy. So what is it? If I'm nervous, how do I socially distance from a massive group of people? And my wife and I, we just kind of stayed on the outskirts. We didn't get in the middle of it, but we were around it. We watched, we listened, we talked to some officers that were there. I talked to some of my officer friends in advance about what to look out for and what to think about. And I came away with a lot of hope. Now, we were only there for about an hour and a half, but there were no arrests. There was no brutality either from police to protesters or protesters attacking police. Now, you and I both know that has not been the case the whole time, either in Kansas City or in any other city. Things have escalated. Sure. But as a person in the body of Christ, that's what I look for in terms of hope. When we come together at the communion table, we haven't figured life out. We are not on the same page, but we both love Christ more than we love ourselves. And we're hoping that bread and juice that forgives the places where we've messed up will pull us closer together in the future than we have been in the past. Politically, I don't know how we get there, but spiritually, I believe that God can help us.
So how do you look at the division between, like, for example, when you go to a protest and it's 4 o'clock in the afternoon and you stay until 6:30,
mm-hmm.
and there are people that are around, masks or not, they're hugging you, they're talking to you, you're actually asking a real conversation. You're almost having to preface, because I am that white Christian male, corporation owner, right? So I preface everything with, I would like an honest answer. What's happening here? And what I got every time was, you are not the problem. Isn't that interesting? They would look you right in the eyes and say, you are not the problem. You're a good person being a good person. Isn't that cool? And I thought, well, honestly, I don't think I am the problem. That's obviously, two of my nurse practitioners are women of color, and they are brilliant people. And I tell them that every day. They come in and hug me on purpose, mask or not. They also check my forehead to make sure I'm, below 98, 98.6. But I mean, they do a great job. And so you get that. We have high level people that we employ on purpose because they're great, not because they're black. It has nothing to do with that. And then having conversations, I'm finding both sides. I'm finding people that say we need to keep this pressure on because Black Lives Matter, and they do, and they have all this energy on it. And then I have the Black Republican side that's like, Bruce, you're not the problem. You've never been the problem. You're somebody out there just trying to be a good person. And I said, well, who are they saying Black Lives Matter to? And honestly, what I got back from, and I've got those recorded so people can go back through my Facebook post if they want to watch them, but with people that basically say Black Lives Matter needs to be said to Black people. They don't talk about the 3 people that died yesterday being shot with drive-bys by Black people dying from Black people. And so I don't know how to reconcile this. If I'm not the problem, how can I stand in solidarity and love, bring Christ into it anymore than I currently can? Yet I still feel in some ways like there are those out there that are saying that, no, you need to do something. Any idea what that something is?
As a pastor, I represent our church. And if someone has a negative experience at our church, it has nothing to do personally with whether I was a part of their negative experience. They could come in, they could not get greeted. Somebody could refuse to show them where the restroom is or how to get their kids checked in or any of that kind of thing. I may just be the guy up there preaching.
Right.
But if they had a bad experience at my church, my role is to say, I'm sorry that you had that experience here. Regardless of my involvement in it, I didn't want that person to be treated that way, is kind of how I feel. I was watching Just Mercy the movie with Jamie Foxx that came out a while ago, but it's free on a lot of the platforms right now. And what just floored me was the very end where they kind of tell you, since these events, here's what's taken place. So I hate to kind of talk about the plot if somebody that's going to watch this hasn't seen it yet.
Spoiler alert, guys! Turn it off now, okay?
Please do. This is a spoiler. So the sheriff, who knowingly and wrongfully got arrested and got the guy convicted.
Right.
He was reelected. And I can't remember, I think it's Alabama. He was reelected in Alabama for like 15 to 20 more years of service in that community. After the trial where he was declared innocent, the people who knew that he had profiled Jamie Foxx's character continued to reelect him over and over and over again. In Kansas City, I think one of the really fascinating things happening right now is the whole concept of J.C. Nichols Parkway, or street name and statue. And you can kind of take the statue conversation in a number of different directions. I was not born and raised in Kansas City, but Kansas City certainly is not the only place that has set out on a map where some people can and be and others can't be, and that sort of thing. I think it's very fascinating to be a white male in 2020 who tries to be as open-minded and as justice-oriented and as inclusive as possible, and yet still have other people around us who are not in white, straight, male Christian folks who have had a less than that experience, and try to figure out some way to even that up, even if you and I weren't part of any part of their unfortunate experience. You love my wife. You treat my wife amazing. You have given my wife amazing chiropractic care. And yet she's been asked for her papers 3 times in the 9 years we've lived in Kansas City. You didn't do that. You don't treat her any different. But that has been her experience as a Latina. Mm-hmm. She works in hospitals, and some of her patients only speak Spanish. She has spoken Spanish to those patients in order to really understand what they're going through if they can't describe it or don't have a translator. And she's been told by other hospital staff, we speak English here. Those kind of silly things, right? And so I know we're not,
because I don't want to cry. You get that. It's like,
right?
Come on.
Right. But, well, it's because if you're somebody who advocates for other people, that's nonsense, right?
Nonsense.
And that's why you're laughing, because it's nonsense. So it's okay to simultaneously hold intention. We haven't arrived there yet, and I'm not perpetrating evil to my knowledge, and not know what the next step for that is. So people that say Black Lives Matter, my understanding is that they're saying either me or somebody I dearly love is either currently or has in the past experienced something that nobody should have to experience. And I don't really know the platform or the understanding of the Black Republican folks that are talking about what you're talking about, but I would assume they could potentially be saying, listen, this isn't as widespread as the movement is maybe making it seem to be. And so maybe there's some kind of middle ground there. I'm not sure.
I think I am, though, Mark, and I'll just tell my own story. I started out as a chiropractor, become a businessman, go into integrative medicine, hire medical doctors, nurse, but you know my story. But I have to tell you that I have actually seen what I would call systemic racism. Okay, systemic, not there's a knucklehead here and there, and they just are, and that's how that goes. And we need to address that. That needs to be part of the educational process. And I totally am into that. But as a chiropractor, every single day of my 30-year career, someone calls and says, I have to cancel my appointment because my medical doctor told me I can't see chiropractors. For whatever reason, every single day of my career. And I'm going to tell you, it averages at least once a day, where somebody will call, chiropractors cause strokes. These are absolute lies. Any more than Black men kill white women, it is just absolutely a lie, but it doesn't make any difference, right? You get the point. I have dealt with systemic racism, if you want to call it that, prejudice, directed at me, to the point that my wife and I stopped going to parties in my neighborhood, because every time there would be someone there that was a patient of mine, I'd get this gorgeous hug. I'd get this, Dr. Bruce, and you know how everybody knows me as that. And I would get this great hug and be like, this is the best doctor. And they're shaking my shoulder. Yeah, I'm glad I'm here. I'm glad to be that for you. I love trying to be a hero. It's great, right? Whatever that is. And I'll get at least one person in that party that will come up and go, so you're a doctor, and the big eyes and the whole thing, right? And then, yeah, I'm and then what kind of doctor, what's your specialty? And I'm a chiropractor. And they'll just leave. And I'm not kidding. Every single party we went to the point where my son didn't want to become a chiropractor because he didn't want to have to explain that chiropractors are good doctors that deal with the small stuff we deal with every single day. Yeah. Isn't that weird? But it's systemic, okay? And what I think the point of the Black Republicans come to is, okay, that particular conversation, the bad stuff was stopped 150 years ago, all right? And we've had a Black president for 8 years. So I would tell you that if we have a chiropractor that becomes president of the AMA for 8 years, yeah, I'm not going to have a lot of stuff to be able to say, well, it's the medical doctors that are holding me down. You see, I'm just trying to draw a corollary here, and you understand it. You've heard me have this conversation, but I'm not going to be able to say that anymore. I'm going to have to say that's kind of me now. I mean, it's on me. And so I want people to hold themselves accountable. You know, I have never turned, you know me well, but it doesn't matter what color they are. Somebody comes up, hey, I'm so-and-so. Hi, I'm Bruce. I mean, that is exactly what's occurring here, in my opinion. And yet my police officers, and they are Black and white, of course, I deal with all, and I see lots of them. When they come into my office, they say that it's actually they're having to take mental days, and it's not the people that stay there till 8 p.m. They start the protest when they do, after work, 8:30. It seems like all of the loving people, the lovers, go home. They head out, and the haters show up. And that's what I'm trying to figure out about this. How do we educate the haters? We don't hate you back. We just don't. And the lovers, this is the message. This is the grace message that we want spoken to more. Any thoughts?
Well, I guess one of the things that maybe I would clarify is I probably take what you say to be the bad stuff being 150 years ago. I guess I would take that more to be like the end of slavery. Is that what you're kind of pointing to with 150? Yes. Okay, so Arnold Schwarzenegger was born in a different country, correct?
Yes.
Okay, and he was the governor of California. Which
is good and bad. I'm just going to leave that there. They do have the 49ers after all.
Oh my gosh. So how come nobody asked for his birth certificate?
Yeah. No,
so,
you're right.
And I'm not saying that a birth certificate and slavery are comparable.
No,
but that Just Mercy movie was 1993. I mean, I was in high school. That's not that long ago. No. They just had the 6 people who have died in police altercations, the Breonna Taylors and Ahmaud Arbery's of the world. 6 of these folks, they had laminated pictures of them with a noose tied around them in Wisconsin 3 weeks ago, hanging from a tree. So it's not that the bad stuff is over. It's also not that it's exactly the same. It's different. But I could easily see why BLM would still have some juice and still have a lot of things that are motivating it to continue to go forward. But like any movement, it's not homogenous. Mm-hmm. And I guess what I would say is you may be more familiar of this than the average person because this really awful church is very close to us. But have you heard of Westboro Baptist before? Okay, they're in Kansas, probably less than 2 hours drive from here. Their website is godhatesfags.com. And you and I would call them as a church an outlier. And the one thing we would beg people to do is to never associate us with them as fellow Christians. I can't put the percentage to how many folks in the BLM have gone off the rails or are doing some of the looting or burning things and that sort of thing, versus how many people in the movement are working for peace and justice in the right fashion. But I I don't I don't know. However, somebody comes across Black Lives Matter, I don't know that it's going anywhere for a significant period of time. And so what I really wonder is not just from a wellness doctor perspective or from a church perspective, but in terms of culture. And it's really hard right now not to envelop politics into the culture. It's how we read and see the media. It's how we have conversation and all that. How can we have some sort of conversation where the Venn diagram of wanting people to serve and protect us and for them to be safe too,
Yes.
and for folks of color to stop being marginalized, how that can overlap and have it not be, if you're for them, you're not for them, and if you're for them, you can't be for them. And one of the things that I love is you are very similar to me in that there could be somebody that came in that you really didn't like, but if they have carpal tunnel, you're going to help them.
Yeah, I'm going to fix it. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
it's the same with church. So people have said really ugly things to me, but at the end of the day, they need Jesus just as much as I do. So I think you and I have a real good idea how to do this on an individual and a company basis. Where it gets really difficult is from a community, a state, and a country basis, how we go about it.
Yeah, that's why I wanted the conversation. I don't always agree with the people. I don't, even with you, but I do agree with our outcomes. And I agree that I love what you bring, because you bring intelligence, you bring experience, you bring your own stuff behind it. You don't just believe at me, which I find to be very difficult. Why do you hold that position? Because somebody told me to, or, oh my goodness, instead of answering a question, we had something on nextdoor.com. This is another thing, right?
Oh gosh, nextdoor.com.
Right? It's Facebook for tall grade schoolers, is what it feels like to me. Somebody asked legitimately, that's all they did. And they just asked, does anybody know someone who has actually had COVID-19? This is the question.
I saw that guy.
Did you see it?
Yep.
This guy gets lambasted by everybody. I hope you delete this post. I can't believe that you don't think COVID's a real thing. It sounds to me like you don't believe this. It sounds whatever this is. Instead of just answering the question, the R in bridge stands for respect. And it was always, what it really means is the most respectful interpretation of, right?
Yeah.
But these keyboard warriors will just jump in on the worst possible thing. The reason why I brought up systemic racism and what that feels like, honestly, is because it doesn't matter the science. It doesn't matter in my world. It doesn't matter the science behind anything. You're just wrong because you are a chiropractor. All chiropractors are this. That's it. We're done with the conversation. Well, what can I call you and talk to you about it? No, right? That was the well, what I have told my people, and I get to teach chiropractors and medical doctors, but I get to teach chiropractors too. And what I tell them is, don't let that even be part of something you take on. Let that flow through you and just continue with your real question if you have one. Like that guy on Nextdoor. That's why I typed out, nobody on this has ever said that he didn't believe in COVID-19. I mean, and I did. I actually put a couple of posts in there and just kind of let it go. It's like, oh my goodness. I mean, we're in this full attack mode for whatever reason. It's like people are leaning forward, waiting to take offense. It's the old joke. In fact, old comedy is one of my favorite things. It's the old joke of somebody coming home and asking their wife how they are, and them asking, what does that mean?
Right.
So it's the old, it meant, how are you? I mean, right? And it's the ridiculousness that seems to occur there. And my opinion and my position has always been, don't allow it to become part of your vernacular. Don't allow hate to enter your own heart ever. And there was a brilliant lady that did, I wish the Green Mile was actually part of what she did. And I can't remember, but it's a nun who said, if you want to take war out of the world, take it out of your own heart first.
Yeah.
And that is what that is my central point every time I go back to that, just because you may disagree. And there will be people, I hope, that comment that have other opinions. Please have your other opinion. But that doesn't have to make somebody else wrong. In that way. But, for me, Black Lives Matter KC is doing a great job. Have you seen what they do out there? They're the ones that are actually trying really hard to bring the police together, bring education. Black Lives Matter KC has been very different from what you hear about the other movements in the Black Lives Matter community. And you're right, and really right. A movement is going to have pockets of everything involved. People that are just mad because they're mad for things that have happened to them, people that are mad because of things that supposedly have happened to other people, people who get mad. The person that I can never stand is the person that's not a chiropractor, never been in my shoes, never been in my position, but wants to defend me to somebody because they don't believe in me. I'm like, wait, don't do that.
Right.
If I want to say something, I'll say it's and of course, Christianity has a history of being very dangerous.
Yep.
And yet
Preach.
holding true.
Yeah. Here's one of the reasons why I feel like you and I are kindred spirits. You have this thing where you're offering somebody wellness in a way they might not have grown up with. You're sick, you go to the doctor. The doctor means family practitioner. It's connected to a hospital, yada, yada, yada. So when you talk, sometimes you're having to defend what you do to somebody who hasn't yet experienced it and has no anecdote for it. And it means you go to parties in the neighborhood, you have that happen enough and you get disillusioned. Well, guess what? I'm the guy who tells people at parties what I do at the very end of the party or not at all. Because if you want to kill the conversation, tell somebody you're a pastor. And that could be for any number of reasons. It could be because people are dealing with their own sin and they don't want the judgmental eye of the church on them. It could be a financial, maybe they don't give or they're not generous and they don't want to talk about that, or they think the church just wants money. I think it also could be in the last 20 to 30 years, the church has not done a great job with such sexual ethics and boundaries. And even though I haven't done something with somebody, I represent the institution that has and has covered it up. And that's hurtful to so many people. And so you and I have the same kind of thing where we're called to our profession. We do it with every ounce of love and respect for others that we have, trying to provide hope. And yet that means we're on the defensive a lot. But here's the thing from my small group that blew my mind, and I would love to know your opinion on it. One of the guys, this guy in our small group, in my small group, is Brent Nemeth. He's gone to our church for a long time. He is the president of a branding and marketing company called J. Schmid. Yeah. And we were talking through our small group material the other day for this sermon that we were going over. And he said, the difficulty for people, and I'm going to put you in this category with me, is that the more you learn, the more you want to talk to people about what you've learned and what you know.
Yeah.
But potentially what influences people more than anything else is not logic, but emotion. And that drives me bonkers because I'm reading things in Greek, I'm reading things in Hebrew. I can't wait to tell it to you on Sunday. And yet, if I don't have a story that makes it applicable, it may do a flyby. You may have some new cutting edge research and somebody could just quickly dismiss it as, that's too much for me. I'm not emotionally invested. I don't know anybody that would need this, or I don't care. And so even though logically it's fascinating and compelling, if emotionally they're not tied into it, and that can be the same thing, whether it's Black Lives Matter, whether it's masks, whether it's politics in general in the November election. I mean, think about stem cells, right? Because this is something that you guys are doing really awesome work with.
Yep.
What was the common emotional response to stem cells 5 years ago, 8 years ago, right? It was, we're killing babies and all this sort of stuff. And it couldn't be further from the logical truth.
Right.
But if somebody's emotionally tied to that thought, so I'm curious what you think about the logical, emotional part of our human existence.
Yeah, it's not what you do, it's why you do it, right? And I agree. Simon Sinek is what you go through. There's a great TED talk out there for that. Mm-hmm. And you have to get through the logical is a barrier, actually. Your words and whatever, that's a barrier that circles you at all the time. And you have to have enough of that noise in logic to eventually come in and tie into a belief system. I think the only real problems with the people that I deal with sometimes are that because they hold values in other things in life, whatever those other things are, they now will hold a belief system. As soon as somebody tells them that happens to tells them a thing that resonates with their original value, they will hold on to that forever, even when new, more important, better data is available.
Right.
And that's where I think I run into that. So I would say that's absolutely true. You know, why do you believe in God? Because the alternative is horrible. I mean, it really is. I believe in Christ because every time I've called on someone when I was in a horrible state, I've called on him. He's been there, and he's been there very obviously in my life. So for me, it's almost cheating. I've asked and he's answered, you know, and answered well for me. So that's always been the case for me, and it's that measure of peace that you always want to bring in. In fact, when I teach medical doctors too, the one thing I teach when they're students, I say, what's the best thing that a pastor, a doctor can possibly give a person? The best thing, and I put out there, thing can be anything. And to be honest with you, it's a measure of peace. If you take a look at what it is that we sell, when you come to a doctor's office and you've got a migraine headache that's been going on for 3 days, it might be a tumor, right? You're steeped in some kind of sinful act that you have a tough time uncovering and getting away from. It seems like it's inextricable to your existence right now. And you come to someone like you, what are you doing in that case? It's like, oh, wait a minute, there's a system in place to handle this. Mm-hmm. That is as important as anything that we do. And I do believe that there is a system in place to handle this. I believe that it has to do a lot with personal responsibility on both sides of this. The COVID thing, instead of trying to avoid COVID, shore up your body, right? Instead of trying to avoid sin, go towards something that brings God into the conversation. You know, you get what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. Same thing with how I would view logic and emotion. Instead of just feeling one way, hey, we should defund the police and getting the big eyes and all excited about it. Okay, have a conversation like this, record it on Zoom or wherever you decide to do it, record a message with a person that disagrees with you and bring forward your argument, but listen to theirs as well. You know, don't make them wrong. Just hear the sides that honestly you didn't know. You didn't know. You didn't go to the police academy and you didn't deal with all of that. So whatever that stuff is, and you didn't realize the stuff that they deal with on a daily basis, right? Right. It's the great thing that you did when you went to one of those protests. The odds are, though, you were gone before 10 p.m.
Oh, for sure. Yep.
Because everybody was told to go home. And at that point in time, it becomes unlawful. And those who stick around now are purposefully doing something that I don't think has Christ in it. I think we have a love problem here. That's my thoughts.
Yeah, it's, and I would add to that, I grew up in a very white neighborhood, and I went to a very white school. Just, we didn't have people of color living in the neighborhood. That's really all that meant. And I had a pretty sheltered experience until I went to college. And what I figured out was I'm a pretty inclusive person by nature. And so I tried to figure out how I could include people who don't look like me that I haven't met yet, whether it's ethnicity or color or gender or orientation or football allegiance or whatever the case may be. One fascinating thing that happened from that, you know this as well as anybody else who Googles the United Methodist Church, we've been fighting over orientation for almost 50 years now.
Sure.
And it's coming to a head. My best friend in ministry, a pastor friend of mine, is on the opposite side of theology, or the way you understand God in terms of orientation. And so all I've been asking myself is, how do I move towards my friend and have more conversations with my friend so that potentially we could stay in the same tent of church work together, even if we lived it out somewhat differently. And I think that's what's so helpful in what you're talking about, getting leaders together, putting stuff out there, having conversations. The more people you talk to who don't look like you and don't agree with you, the wider you will see the world, and maybe the better you'll actually see God in the process. How boring would it be if you went to Arrowhead and all 70,000 people rooted for the Chiefs and the opposing team had no fans whatsoever? If everyone in the whole world were Chiefs fans, Wouldn't that be boring? Isn't part of the fun of being a Chiefs fan to see the disappointment on a Bronco or a Raider fan's face? But if you don't have that and your world gets really small because you only want to be with people who agree with you, man, after a while, that's a really isolating, boring experience in life.
It would be. Well, all I can do is just say thanks. I'm glad you were here. You and I could talk all day, and we probably should. And we'll do this again. I know that you offered to help us with some of the bridging the gap stuff that we have over at Bridge, and I really do appreciate that as well. If it's all right with you, I'm going to ask of you one of the things that you do all the time, and if that you would close this in a prayer, and just let each other know that whatever side we're on, we are absolutely inclusive, and we would very much like to hear what people have to say.
Absolutely. Let's pray. God, we give you thanks for the relationship and the friendship that Bruce and I have, and how that strengthens both of us in terms of our leadership, our job, our families, and the love and care we can give for others. God, I pray for all the folks who are listening to this, the folks who have commented below, knowing that Bruce and I will be thinking about them and praying for the things that they raise. God, we pray that since we are not of one mind, that we might be civil, that we might be able to talk about the things we disagree about, to gain more understanding and more clarity, more tolerance for each other, and to try to figure out through the wisdom of your Spirit a way forward that honors everybody in the situation. And so we pray for people who feel like part of their life is being taken away either by laws and regulations or by the color of their skin or the gender that they have or anything like that. God, we ask that each person would feel that they are your child and that they are valuable and that they are important. And we ask that in whatever way we go about having joy, love, or laughter in our lives, whatever way we provide hope for others, God, we ask that you would do it in a way that would bring peace to the folks around us. In the name of Jesus, we pray. Amen.
Amen.